This is like the fourth time I've tried to record this video because people keep messaging me and people keep wanting to do video calls. No, honestly, it's a really good problem to have. I'm glad you guys are calling in. I'm giving out bonus points, which makes me happy, which makes you happy. So anyhow, I'm going to try to make this quick again because never know when somebody's going to pop up and want to chat. Anyway, I feel so popular. So I've got you working on this annotated bibliography thing, right? Last time I asked you to think about macro sources, places where you can get information. And I steered you kind of towards like media sources, like CNN, MSNBC, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Well, let's kind of take a different approach this time. Now, I'm going to be kind of on my computer for a minute, giving you some guidance. What I want you guys to do, and what I'm going to kind of give you some background on today, and what I might do is I might link you to this page underneath this video because I want you guys to use Galileo. Galileo, the type of sources that you get from Galileo are what we call scholarly sources. Scholarly sources, oh God, just saying it makes me want to watch wrestling. Scholarly sources are, the best way I can think to describe them, they're magazines. Very much like magazines, periodicals, and they're published by like universities, colleges. They are basically managed by a panel of highly educated people within a particular field. We're talking like, you know, the PhDs, the people who have published, run these magazines. I say magazines, it's kind of a misnomer. It really is supposed to be something a lot more like legit than that. And these things are expensive too. They can run anywhere from the hundreds to the thousands of dollars for a year's subscription, depending on what discipline they are. Medical journals are crazy expensive, and they're usually not even that long. They're like a little, I used to have a few on my shelf. I think I got rid of them because I'm not like that. I'm not too into the academic writing anymore. But basically, in order to get into these journals, you have to have a really high degree, right? You have to be trained to write like an academic, and you have to submit articles to these groups of PhDs and to these well-published people in order to appear in the journal. Now, in our discipline, the academic post-secondary education, for most universities and colleges, getting a teaching position requires instructors to publish. We used to call it publish or perish. It was a requirement of the position. It's not, you're not even really getting most of the recognition and most of the seniority at a position for being good at teaching what it is you teach. You get the recognition for the research and the writing that you do. A lot of people don't realize that. The writing is extremely important. That's what gets you the job security, what we used to call tenure. A lot of ways, it seems like tenure might be going the way of the dinosaur, which is all right because I certainly am not going to get it. Not that I'm complaining. Anyhow, so these articles are all very streamlined. They're all very, very, trying to think of some nice adjectives because they're not the most entertaining thing in the world to read. They're very dry because they're written for other academic types. And so a lot of the times it's not the most entertaining read, you know, like Newsweek, Time, Popular Mechanics, National Geographic. They try to put a lot of emphasis on reading stuff and writing stuff that's fun to read, making it accessible to you. These journals aren't going to do that. Now, just to give you an idea of some of the subjects you'll find on Galileo when you're looking at these scholarly journals, you'll find stuff for politics, science, literature, engineering, anything you can think of. Criminal justice is going to be on there. Internet studies, sociology, all the stuff that you're going to study in college, and even a whole bunch of other stuff is going to have magazines and it's going to have publications where people are writing about what's going on in their field, right? That's essentially what you're doing when you log on to Galileo. Now, these journals are expensive, and who ends up paying for them for you to have access to them? Well, you do. When you pay your tuition, when you go to college, it's the colleges that participate in the Galileo program to give you access to these databases. I've read a lot over the years about information theory. I do it so you don't have to. Information wants to be expensive. Information wants to be free, but it really wants to be expensive as well. So it's the taxpayers that pay for these journals. Now, as an academic and as somebody who writes and has tried to write for these journals in the past, I've had my publications, dagnabbit, but I didn't get paid for my contributions. As an academic, I'm expected to donate my work. because that's part of what gets me the job later. I've always told people that the reason I got this position at the technical college really is because I got the publication. It's the publication, the New Digital Scholar, set me aside all the other candidates. That was how I was compensated for it. So when the schools are paying all this money to have access to these journals, where's that money going? I attended a computers and writing conference a long time ago. It was one of the most interesting speeches I ever heard in my life. It was by Dave Perry. And textbook companies are one of the primary people who fund, print, and put these journals out. And then they use the material that's published in these textbooks to go and shape the textbooks later. They find the people who are at the top of their field and they get them to write the textbooks. So that's where all this stuff is coming from. So it's really interesting how the sausage is made behind the curtain, so to speak. But in any case, the reason I'm telling you this is because the information that you've got access to in Galileo, believe it or not, that's pretty cool. A lot of people will never have access to information like that. And you should take advantage of it because it's pretty nifty. It's not that nifty. I'm like a dad from TV in the 50s. Now, like I said, this is not the most readable material. It's not like reading a novel or reading a magazine. It's going to be thick. It's going to be gross. It's a slog getting through this stuff. But at the same time, it's coming from the best of the world, especially if you can get it current, updated. So what I want you guys to do in the next leg of this assignment, I want you to log on to Galileo. I'm going to give you the link. I want you to go on Galileo, and I want you to find macro sources. You'll notice I'm saying macro sources again. I'm not necessarily interested in the micro sources yet, the actual articles. I want you to look for publications in Galileo. You'll probably only really be able to sift through those in terms of the articles that you'll find, but I want you to look at the periodicals themselves and look for ones that might be useful for you. This is going to be a pain because Galileo's search engine is not the most user-friendly thing. Now, I don't want anybody to get mad at me because it's a lot better than it used to be. When I was a grad student, Galileo's code looked like it predated Google, and it was a challenge to use. They've made it a lot better. But going on to Galileo, type very general search terms. Look for topics and look for the periodicals that come up and see if you can find some interesting ones and find out more about them. This is going to be a little challenging, not because you can't find them, but because Galileo is just a bit of a challenge for people to use. Like I said, I'll include the link. I believe you should have access to Galileo without the password. It should be single sign-on with your school account. You know, this is another interesting thing too. Don't share that information because you can get in a lot of trouble. There's a lot of money in, scholarly education because that stuff ain't free. You pay for access to it. So please be careful with it. On that note, that's pretty much all I'm wanting from you guys in the second half of the week. You found 5 macro sources out in the wild, in the media. Go on Galileo and see what you can find behind the wall, behind the scholarly wall that might be useful. Now, again, this is something I want you to keep in mind. Let's say you end up using stuff or writing about stuff that you don't end up using. Let's say you're talking about the protests right now, and you end up, for some weird reason, writing about a publication that mainly talks about gardening. Believe it or not, I'm not going to be that upset about it as long as you got it from Galileo. That's what matters to me. You can put some weird stuff in there right now. If you're having trouble finding stuff, that's perfectly cool. I want you to go and experiment with the research and going and playing around with Galileo, seeing what it can give you. You don't have to cite anything yet, but keep the information. Post about it in the discussion forums. Tell me about what you find. We're still at a very early drafting phase for this annotated bibliography. We're gathering sources. There's going to be even more after we're done. I've asked for 5 macro sources. We're asking for 5 scholarly sources, macro sources. By the time we're done, we're going to have a total of 20 sources that you're going to be dealing with to try to find information. And we're going to do more of it. This is only really just the beginning. So you're going to have a lot of material to work with. But right now, just keep track of it. Post it in the discussion forum. Chat about it. Let's see what you get. On that note, I'm going to watch wrestling. Yeah.